Hello, everyone. Welcome to week number 2 in Science 200. You've got the first week under your belt. You learned how the textbook works. You participated in the discussion board and you learned more about your classmates and also about me, I hope. You've looked through the course materials and so you're really ready now to get started. Every week I will make a video like this and it will be available on Sunday night or Monday morning in the announcements. So be checking for that, be looking for that. What do I tell you in the announcements? I describe the science that's going on in this particular section for this particular week. I tell you about the assignments that you'll be doing. I'll remind you about deadlines and I'll give you tips and tricks about working your way through this course, doing science in general, that sort of thing. So let's see what we've got going on. So last week, I always like to review what we did last week because there are, of course, connections between all of this information. Last week, what are the natural sciences? You went through that list. What is biology? What do you study in biology? You study life forms. What do you study in chemistry? You study everything from subatomic particles all the way to great big molecules and compounds and that sort of thing. So you learned about the natural sciences. It was interesting to see what you were most interested in. I think the number one choice was astronomy, which is very interesting because that's the study of us on this planet compared to everything else in the universe. Some astronomers look for life. Some astronomers just try to figure out what all the entities are out there in the universe and their relationship to each other. Others study interactions between the bodies that are out there in the universe. Next was probably biology, which is, of course, my love because I'm a biologist. And that is the study of life, including human life and human bodies. So that's always good. Then we had a few people that liked chemistry, so that was good. Environmental science, studying ecosystems, how organisms interact with environments, and that's ecology, and ecology is part of environmental science. So that was very interesting to see, and some of you chose topics to research that had to do with your preferred natural science, and others of you chose something different. So we'll see how this goes. You looked at how science works, and I know that you studied this before. I know you studied it maybe in 7th grade science class. And so you know the basic steps, but really science is more complicated than that. Before you can even formulate a hypothesis, you have to do so much background work. You have to read everything you possibly can about a topic so that you know what the prevailing thoughts are out there about whatever this is that you're interested in. And so you read books, you read journal articles, you have to read the history of whatever this is, all the way up to what is happening right now today with this particular topic. And then you can formulate a hypothesis. You design experiments, and there will be more than one. You don't just set up one type of experiment because you got to figure out every way to test this hypothesis. You do your experiments and you do them over and over and over and over again. You don't do them once. You don't even do them 3 times. If you were lucky in a high school science class, you did experiments 3 times. Okay. In real science, no, you do them over and over and over and over and over again until you can make sure that your results come up every time the same, so that you could show everybody that this is really what is happening, whatever your results are. Then you gather up your results, you make sense of it all, you come to conclusions, and you write up your research in the form of a journal article. And a journal is basically a scientific magazine. And you publish your work in the journal, and then it's out there for everybody to go at. Yeah, and that's really what happens. So people agree with it, disagree with it, say, yes, that's what we saw when we did similar experiments, etc. Or no, the absolute opposite of what we got. And so then you have to figure out, well, which one is it, this way or that way? So that's how science works. And then you continue on your work and do more experiments and answer further questions, because really every time you answer a question, that leads to more questions. So that's how science really works. The importance of revision can't be emphasized enough. We do that a lot in science and a lot with our scientific papers. And you think, well, you've taken an English class before and you know what revision is. But revision to you is fixing grammar, fixing sentence structure, fixing the flow of a story, that sort of thing. No, that's not how it works in science. You really have to get to the point with every single word that you use, because words cost money in these journals. So you have to get to the point. You have to make sure that your thoughts are extremely clear and well said. So there is a lot of revision that happens in science, and you will be doing some of that during this term. You also read the story of Alexander Fleming and penicillin. Alexander Fleming was a famous microbiologist, and he studied microbes, bacteria in particular, Staphylococcus aureus, which is the staph bacteria. And he noticed when he was cleaning up some petri dishes after a vacation that there was a mold growing on one of his plates, and there were no bacteria growing around this mold. And so he thought to himself, well, this mold, this fungus, must be producing some type of chemical that's killing the bacteria. So he investigated this, and he isolated that chemical, and he named it penicillin after the particular mold, Penicillium notatum. And that was the end of his research. He was good. Everything was good at that point. He'd figured it out. Well, other people thought, oh, this is wonderful. I wonder if penicillin could be used to treat bacterial infections in people. Alexander Fleming was not very much impressed with that. He wasn't interested in that. But other people were. And they said, well, we've got gigantic problems. For example, it's very difficult to grow this mold in culture. And then it's very difficult to isolate the penicillin. And then you get there's the tiniest amounts of penicillin. So they had to work through this and figure out how they could mass produce it, which it was mass produced and used widely in World War II and saved a tremendous number of lives, because most soldiers in wars died from, well, sometimes they died directly from their wounds, but a lot of the time they died from the infections that they got from their wounds. And now we had something to combat that. You also picked a research topic, I hope, out of the suggested ones in the Sumo web text. And if you didn't, I may have talked to you about this. And if you are going to pick something else, you do have to run that by me. So I will be talking to you if you have chosen something else. So then this week, what are we doing this week? This week is all about Chapter 2. Oh, by the way, that's some dolphin strand feeding that happens only along a part of the east coast of the United States. Dolphins actually round up fish in groups and force them up onto the land, onto the shore, and the dolphins come up on the land and grab the fish, and that's how they feed. So that's strand feeding. It's a natural sort of behavior. People do not influence this whatsoever. Okay, so on to week 2. Chapter 2. Chapter 2 is very wordy. I'll tell you right now that a scientist did not write Chapter 2, especially me. It would have been probably 5 pages long if I wrote it. But anyway, because I get to the point. Yeah, so anyway, there's a lot of pages to read, and so you don't have a discussion board due this week. You don't have an initial post. You don't have response post this week. You have to do your work in Chapter 2. You're going to learn about cholera, which is a disease that causes a tremendous amount of diarrhea to the point where water is just flowing out of your body, and you usually die from dehydration and loss of electrolytes. Horrible disease. You hear about it. It pops up every once in a while when we have a hurricane, and the hurricane goes through a poor country like Haiti. You'll have outbreaks of cholera. You're going to learn about the importance of sanitation, which we all know now. You know, this is much later in time than the 1840s and 50s. But sanitation is terribly important. Clean water, the effective handling of sewage, washing your hands, all that sort of thing. Clean water is terribly important, and the people in London did not have clean water, which you will find out when you read through chapter 2. There's a concept called miasma, and this was the leading idea of how diseases were transmitted back then. So miasma was stinky fumes in the air. So breathing in noxious odors was the way that they thought most diseases, if not all diseases, were transmitted. Okay, there's a problem with this. Some diseases are transmitted through aerosol droplets. The flu, COVID, wow, don't we already know that? Colds, tuberculosis, all sorts of different diseases are transmitted through aerosol droplets that travel along in air. So that's sort of what miasma is. But then they didn't understand that there were other ways that diseases are transmitted, like touching something, like touching doorknobs. Those are called fomites. Touching things like drinking contaminated water. Oh goodness, mosquitoes, vectors. Other animals transmit diseases to us. There are lots of ways that diseases are transmitted, but they didn't understand this in the 1840s and 1850s in London. Public health was developed to help cut down on the number of deaths from diseases from people living in close proximity to one another. And you will learn how science works, the importance of documenting. You will read about a scientist and a doctor named John Snow and how he documented every case of cholera in neighborhoods, including the deaths. He mapped them all out, and then he showed what their water sources were surrounding these deaths. And he eventually showed the people in London, including the governmental officials, that it was actually the contaminated water from the Thames that people were drinking that had been infected with sewage water that was making everybody develop cholera. And so you will find that out. And you'll see how science works by looking at this particular example. You're going to be working on your topic a little bit more. You're going to develop a research question and look at the example that they give you in the rubric. So if you have chosen electric cars, what kind of question can you come up with to ask about electric cars? What is their carbon footprint? Because everybody's saying, well, they're so much better for the environment. But what is their carbon footprint? Has that been measured? Do we know what it is? Are they actually better for the environment? What new inventions need to be made, changes need to be made to electric cars to make them more usable in the future? Because from what I've seen anyway, from the ones that I know about, they are fairly difficult to use because you don't get much mileage out of one round of energized batteries. If you're looking at biodiversity conservation, I definitely, if I were you, would choose a particular area that you're interested in. Maybe it's someplace that's very close to you, a local area, a local set of woods, a state park, whatever it is. Or maybe you want to do something bigger like the Amazonian rainforest, because that's been in the news an awful lot in the last few years because of all the destruction that's taking place to make way for agriculture. So choose your area and then figure out what type of question you're going to ask about that. What is the effect of massive slash and burning of the Amazonian rainforest in the last 5 years? You can ask a question like that. So develop a research question, and then you're going to figure out ways through this course to answer that question. All right, make sure you use the guidelines and rubric for that to help you understand what you need to turn in. That's very important. And then I usually try to give you a tip of the week. Here's some cute little puffins. Oh my goodness, I saw them in Scotland. I took that photograph right there of those puffins. They were so doggone cute. Oh, by the way, the seagull on the first slide was hunting for puffins. That's why I got so close to it, and it actually hit one of them, and it tumbled down those rocks right there and then got up and waddled off. So anyway, puffins are adorable. So my tip of the week, back to that. Break up your assignments into manageable pieces, and that will include this chapter too. I will tell you that because there's a lot of reading for this, and you have questions to answer on every page. You know that by now after you've been through chapter 1. So break up your assignments into manageable pieces so that you're not doing everything possible on Sunday night. That just makes your life difficult, and you don't want to do that. Do everything ahead if you can, and then you won't have to rush on Sunday night. And I know you already know this, but at least break it up into manageable pieces so that you can get parts of it done as you go through the week. All right. And I want to remind you that I am here to help you. There's my name again, Dr. Janie Sigmon, m.sigmon@snhu.edu. All you have to do is email me. I will answer you as quickly as I can, always within 24 hours. I've never missed that deadline. So ask me questions, get clarification. If you're totally stumped, that's all right. We'll figure it out. I will help you. I'm here to help you. So please call on me and let me help you. All right. With that being said, I hope that you have a wonderful week.